As an anime fan, I have this problem where I am compelled to try out basically every new anime that airs each season and only finish the ones I think are good enough to finish, just on the off chance that I might miss a really good show that no one ended up talking about. I've been doing this for almost 9 years now, but unless you watch my unscripted ramblings over on the side channel, you'll probably never hear my thoughts on some of the hidden gems I find every season. So that's what this video's for. A brief summary of all the anime I finished from the fall 2024 season, and why I think they're worth checking out. 365 Days to the Wedding is the latest entry into the subgenre of rom-coms that I'm sure has a name already, but I'm going to affectionately call Oops, We're Getting Married Now, which is great because I love that shit. What makes this one in particular stand out for me is that this show might have the most socially inept romantic leads I've ever seen, leading the story straight towards a deep dive into exploring communication and how to properly convey your feelings to someone who doesn't have access to your internal thoughts. I found myself relating to these two far more often than I expected, whether it's Ohara's inability to accurately express his frustrations with what others expect from him, or Honjoji's instinct to bottle up her feelings so as not to let others down. Unfortunately, the first half of this series isn't exactly a barn burner of a story. It works well in establishing some of the interesting quirks of our leads, and the supporting cast is pretty fun, but the moment-to-moment interactions can be kind of flat, borderline boring at times, with a lot of this due to how incredibly plain and unambitious the production is. There were more than a few times where I thought this would probably be better in live action, though that would also mean losing a surprisingly ranged performance from Saori Hayami. That said, the chemistry between the leads carried the series a lot further than I expected, and the romance elements definitely started picking up steam in the back half, so overall I would say this anime version of The Proposal was mostly worth my time. I'll Become a Villainess Who Goes Down in History is a series that is equal parts fascinating and frustrating. This latest entry into the burgeoning villainous isekai genre gives us a protagonist, Alicia, who's actually glad she became the villainess because it allows her to address her qualms with the game's heroine and dismantle what she sees as undeserved talk no jutsu style powers of communication. And it made Alicia a shockingly compelling villainess. Unfortunately, this ended up getting balanced out by her receiving what are essentially super studying abilities and becoming extremely overpowered very quickly, constantly doing things that would normally merit major consequences, but walking away mostly scot-free. So it rarely feels like she has to put in much effort to get what she wants. Most of the other characters outside of the heroine are fairly forgettable, but the overall chemistry of the cast, especially between Alicia and Duke, creates some surprisingly engrossing dialogue that allows each episode to fly by with ease. I should also commend it, albeit in a very backhanded way, for probably being the best looking Maho Films anime to date, which is not exactly a high bar. It still has the occasional PNG drift, and the general framing and cinematography aren't especially noteworthy, but it is passable most of the time. And they nailed all of Alicia's designs, so props for that, I guess. It feels like I'm undercutting this series a lot, but I did genuinely enjoy it overall, and I legit did not predict the twist in the final episode, leaving me with enough of a desire for more that I wouldn't mind a second season. The Concierge is the third anime I've seen in the past couple years about being a good hospitality worker, which doesn't sound like a lot, but still feels like a lot for some reason. In any case, I appreciated that this one doesn't try to cover up the fact that sometimes the customer is just an asshole, and watching Akino try to figure out how to deal with them in the best manner possible was pretty engaging. It helps that the department store she works in, as well as its patrons, are drawn so vibrantly and with such attention to detail, especially in how the different anthropomorphic animal characters move around. It's also got a solid balance between zany comedy and heartwarming sincerity, bouncing with ease from the store manager popping out of hammer space without warning, to Kenjiro Tsuda as an aging woolly mammoth reminiscing about his deceased wife. On the other hand, I can't help but notice that there's something unintentionally hollow at the core of this film. It has all the trappings of something that is attempting a critique of capitalism and overconsumption, with all of the animal characters being extinct species, but it never really tries to say anything of substance. The window dressings are nice, but once you peek behind the curtain, there's not much there. Still, it's not as egregiously hollow as it could have been, with some decently engaging characters at the core of it all to keep everything well balanced. And with a shockingly short runtime of just over 75 minutes, it's an easy watch if you're looking for a decent comedy. A herbivorous dragon of 5,000 years gets unfairly villainized Season 2 isn't technically an anime since it's fully a Chinese production, but since I am literally the only person I've ever seen talk about it, I feel the need to promote it as much as I can because this show rules. Outside of Gintama, I can't remember the last anime that got me to consistently laugh this much, with the dragon's attempts at maintaining his false identity as an all-powerful monster reaching new levels of absurdity, and Linzu's blind devotion combined with her short temper and overpowered abilities made her a hilarious counterpart to said dragon. I also ended up way more invested in the royal family struggle between Rosetta and Vanessa than I was expecting, with the latter's well-meaning yet ignorant gestures towards the former making for a compelling and dramatic rivalry. Aside from the gags, it's also got a solid sense for good action sequences, some of which were honestly better than a lot of the more mediocre action-centric stuff I watched this year in terms of flashiness and impact, lending to an incredibly well-rounded viewing experience whose only general flaw is that it's a little bit lacking in substance overall. In the midst of a bunch of other mediocre slop that I ended up trying to watch this season, the ease with which I was able to fully settle into this series and get into the groove of binging it reminded me what a good show is supposed to feel like. And with each episode being only 13 minutes long, you could easily breeze through this one in an evening and be left wanting even more screen time from these lovable goofballs. My Hero Academia You're Next was a film that I honestly wasn't super hyped for because I still hadn't shaken off the meh of World Heroes Mission, but I ended up pleasantly surprised. Shonen spin-off movies live and die by two things: movie original characters and big fuck-off action sequences. With the former, You're Next is a bit give and take. I really enjoyed the relationship between Giulio and Anna and how that relationship evolves as the film progresses, but found the fake All Might character to be a bit flatter than I was anticipating and did not offer any thematic substance that may have been hinted at in the trailers. And while it does a better job at incorporating all of Class 1A than the previous film, it still could have gone a lot further. On the other hand, boy, these are some impressive action sequences. Handing the film off to Tensai Okamura came as a complete surprise to me, and his skills as a veteran action director are on full display. Whether it's a high-speed car chase or a punch-em-up of mass destruction, the My Hero films continue to be high-octane thrill fests. I realized as I was writing this that I had a lot less to say positively about the film than when I first saw it, mostly resulting from its story being pretty bog standard, but I still had a hell of a fun time watching it, and you could definitely do way worse in terms of shonen spin-off movies. Much like the motif of smiles that ran throughout the story, I had a big old smirk plastered across my face by the end of the film. Uzumaki is one of those rare, or at least used to be rare, instances of an anime immediately becoming infamous because of its production issues. And while I'd be remiss to gloss over the very obvious drops in quality, I still think there's enough here for it to be a compelling horror series. The overall vibe of an entire town going batshit crazy due to internal forces they seem to have no control over was a perfect match for this body horror extravaganza, and the moments where the artwork manages to shine through delivered some exceptionally creepy and gruesome imagery, occasionally leaving me cringing from the imagined pain. It also nailed the more absurdly comedic aspects of these horrifying elements in a manner similar to the works of Tsutomu Mizushima, such as Another and Mayoiga, managing to keep the tone from stagnating while still keeping the tension high. But, as I mentioned earlier, there is no denying that this production is a textbook example of reasons why David Zaslav is going to hell. Some of this stuff is just plain laughable, and not in the intentional way I mentioned earlier, completely deflating the tension from an otherwise dramatic moment. I also found Kyrie to be mostly uncompelling as the lead character, though Shuichi's doom or resignation helped bolster the overall sense of dread. Is it better than the source material? No, not even close. And maybe I was just in full cope mode while watching it, but this is not a completely broken series front to back. I feel comfortable calling it good regardless of the critical consensus. Try it out for yourself when you're in the mood for some eerie Lovecraftian horror. Sengoku Youko Season 2 is a sequel that I wasn't as hyped for as I ought to have been because the first season was a bit of a downgrade from the manga, and Tokyopop decided to fuck off and stop releasing the volumes that take place after Season 1, but as a die-hard Satoshi Mizukami fanboy, I gave it a go anyway and had a pretty good time. Swapping out Jinka for Senya as the main protagonist was a pretty ballsy move that ended up playing into the story's central themes regarding the cycle of violence and self-acceptance extremely well. And seeing Senya grow and mature through the support of those around him made his final confrontation with his own self-doubt quite gratifying. This is also an incredibly unpredictable series regarding the direction of its plot, and Mizukami's deft melding of fantasy and sci-fi flavors craft a vibrantly fun setting. Unfortunately, this season still has mostly the same issues that Season 1 did. The pacing always feels like it's a bit too fast, leading some of the pivotal emotional moments to lack the lasting impact they could have had, and the overall artwork is just barely above average on the whole, rarely presenting anything truly sensational and leaving Evan Call's soundtrack to do a bit more heavy lifting than it would have otherwise needed. At the end of the day though, it's still got all the things that make Mizukami one of my favorite authors, and with an immensely satisfying and thorough conclusion, I'm glad I stuck around to see this one through to the end. Blue Lock Season 2 was universally derided as a colossal downgrade and visual disappointment, much like Uzumaki. And, again like Uzumaki, I feel as though it has been judged far too harshly. Yes, it has major compositing problems and not so great CG assets problems, but overall it still manages to make up for those issues in the way Blue Lock normally does. Hyper-impacting shots and an incredibly compelling narrative. I also didn't think Season 1 was especially incredible in terms of how things actually moved, so I guess that lowered my overall expectations for Season 2. In any case, having a whole season under its belt allowed for the story to delve deeper into more interesting character combinations, both in terms of styles of play and personality clashes, with the addition of Shido's Mad Dog insanity being a huge highlight. This season also made me realize just how much Blue Lock relies on its soundtrack to keep the momentum moving at a brisk pace, using a wide range of genres from hard rock to orchestral to electronic to even something jazz adjacent to keep your blood pumping as each match progresses, and it makes the moments where the soundtrack drops out that much more impacting. Though it can't completely subdue the over-explanations of events dragging a scene to a crawl issue we see so often in this genre of anime. For all its faults, Blue Lock has a complete mastery of hype, and the final episode of this new season had no goddamn right to be one of the best episodes from all of 2024, so I can easily recommend this season if you're fully bought into the core of what Blue Lock is selling. Dandadan was by far the most highly anticipated new IP of the season, and it certainly didn't disappoint based on my expectations. Ayase and Okarun are easily one of my favorite protagonist duos of the season, with how strong their comedic and potentially romantic chemistry is, and their tendency to actually sit down and talk about what's bothering them instead of letting misunderstandings lead them down the wrong path was pretty refreshing. The seamless blending of supernatural and sci-fi elements germinates a spark of uniqueness that seems to be growing rarer and rarer in a climate of intentionally derivative works. And this aspect is further enhanced by Science Saru's astounding production quality. Eye-catching color design, fluid animation, and mind-blowing action set pieces fill this series to the brim with eye candy and make it one of the most impressive productions of the year. However, production value can only take you so far when your choice of humor is this immature. Granted, some of it is kinda funny, but a lot of it is also immensely groan-worthy, especially with the introduction of Gigi, who I am very much not excited to revisit based on my experience with the manga. This next part isn't necessarily a criticism, but I do need you to know for your own preparedness that everyone who said the sexual assault scene in episode 1 is the only time that happens is lying through their teeth. Just be aware of that, especially with how that immensely frustrating cliffhanger is going to kick off season 2. Despite my hang-ups, I can't deny I had a blast watching this one and will absolutely be sticking around for more ghoulish fun. Ranma 1/2 is the anime remake that I wasn't expecting to be good enough to make this list, but consistently left me incredibly satisfied at the end of each episode. It's been nearly a decade since I read the manga, and yet this anime immediately brought back fond memories of why I fell in love with the series in the first place. The comedic energy is quick-witted and punchy enough to keep the pacing brisk, yet still allows you to vibe in the moment. And the sprawling cast of lovably frustrating oddballs keeps the episodic stories fresh and exciting. I was legit hooked by the chemistry between Ranma and Akane, with the ending of episode 8 having me completely glued to the screen. And the clever situational timing for Ranma's gender swaps adds in so many levels of romantic complexity with other characters that it refuses to let you get bored. I know from manga experience that the will they won't they stagnancy will definitely test my patience in later seasons, but for right now I adore this love-hate dynamic. I was a little concerned at first that the more rounded character designs wouldn't be able to capture the original charm Takahashi imbued into them, but the wide range of facial expressions quickly proved me wrong. On top of that, there is some genuinely good action to enjoy. Fluid and creative choreography combined with ambitious cinematography and spatial awareness showcased a willingness to strike a strong balance between rom-com shenanigans and martial arts excitement. This show has the vibe of a really good Saturday morning cartoon, with every episode leaving a big dumb grin on my face, and I can't wait to see more. I just hope the next season figures out how to make Happosai tolerable. One Piece Fan Letter is a project that has been begging to be made for a while now. A short spin-off about some relatively inconsequential characters within the One Piece universe and how their lives have been affected by the Straw Hats upending the world order feels like a no-brainer in hindsight and fills the same niche as something like Twilight Wings or Poketoon does for the Pokemon franchise. The main protagonist's unbridled admiration for Nami carries the age-old shonen theme of inspiring the next generation with incredibly moving and uplifting narrative drive, while the pair of Marine brothers placed as foils against Luffy and Ace showcases the destructive power of Devil Fruit users and how seemingly minuscule the average soldier is by comparison. And the many cameo appearances from the Straw Hats and other One Piece regulars provide excellent comedic relief to pump you with just enough fan service without distracting from the anime original characters. The true power of this episode, however, lies in its absolutely impeccable visual presentation. Lavish color choices, flexible yet immediately iconic character designs, intriguing visual symbolism, and jaw-dropping action all come together to craft a non-stop brilliant piece of animation. This is, quite simply, one of the best looking things I've seen the entire year, representing One Piece as a whole perfectly in its creativity and ambition. Truth be told, the only reason it isn't higher on this list is because I'm not quite as big a One Piece fan as its core base is, and so it didn't fully move me with the same intensity as the aforementioned Pokemon spin-offs. But the fact that I still gushed about it this much shows how masterfully it executed this idea, and how ripe for narrative exploration the world of One Piece is. Mononoke Phantom in the Rain was like settling into an old familiar couch. If that old couch kept you in a heightened state of tension for over an hour straight and blasted you with as much visual information as possible. This franchise made the leap from TV to film remarkably well, with its thriller mystery base keeping my attention fully locked in, while the character drama unfolding on top of it constantly tugged at my heartstrings. Asa and Kame have incredible chemistry, and seeing their bond evolve and stand up to the trials of supernatural threats was supremely captivating, with the ever-relevant theme of what will you throw away to move up in the world keeping me in a constant mood of worry and anxiety, all while the medicine seller is doing bizarre exorcism rituals to lead the audience through a twisted spiritual whodunit. While the visuals can get a bit too explosive at times, it's rare in the modern climate to see this level of detail paid to set design, clothing, color choice, and all those cinematic building blocks that give a film its distinct appearance and tone. And the movie quality upgrade to the animation adds even more dynamism to the camera work and action set pieces. Top it all off with a bombastic and nerve-rattling Taku Iwasaki score, and you've got a movie that I won't be forgetting anytime soon, leaving me fervently awaiting its next installment. Bleach: Thousand Year Blood War Part 3 continues to be one of, if not the most, consistently high-quality Shonen Jump adaptation of recent memory. The creativity of Bankai Powers is reaching peaks I could have never predicted, even if I didn't fully understand some of them. Tomohisa Taguchi's signature mono and dichromatic color schemes give this arc a distinct and iconic visual presence, and the action set pieces are just goddamn incredible. I don't even mind most of the obvious CG assets because they just look really fucking cool. And the more graphic presentation of the fight scenes tickles that primal part of my brain that enjoys a well-earned splatter kill. Adding Shiro Sagisu's hype beyond all reasons soundtrack on top of it all gives the series the drive it needs to push the intensity over the edge. While the overarching plot for this season felt a bit shakier in its sense of direction, the individual stories of different Soul Reapers and Quincy's that take on starring roles more than made up for it, with Shunsui's episode being my personal favorite. We also finally got an answer to why Ishida has gone full traitor, and without spoiling anything, it ended up being an "oh, that was kind of obvious, why the hell didn't I think of that" moment that recontextualizes part of his character in a manner befitting his mission. While this is probably my least favorite entry into this arc so far, it's still endlessly entertaining and incredibly easy to binge, and I can't wait for the final part to see how this member of the Big Three wraps it all up. Uma Musume: Beginning of a New Era is an absolute explosion of a film from start to finish, bursting at the seams with as much vibrancy and intensity as you could possibly cram into a single movie. The exhilaration you'd expect from the races is present in full force, but with an exponentially more unhinged presentation. These horse girls seem to be practically breaking out of their own character designs during the most intense moments, and the spectacular light show accompanying each push forward was simply dazzling. This intensity is also present in the non-racing scenes, with the many confrontations between Jungle Pocket and Agnes Tachyon oozing with cinematic style and thematic symbolism. Even the calmer moments have an emotional tension to them that refused to let me look away from the screen. Pocket nails her role as the rising star with her desires cut out from under her and having to deal with the process of readjusting her goals and getting over the psychological hurdles she's built up in her own mind, while Tachyon as a mad genius overlord had me hooked on her charisma alone and fully engrossed in the struggles she deals with in the final act. I do wish the other two leads had more substance to them because they just kind of feel like hangers-on for the most part, but their vibe still works to bolster the overall sense of drive and competition. This is an absolute runaway freight train of a film and probably the most exciting thing I've watched all year, minute for minute. Look Back is something truly special. An adaptation of a manga by one of the most acclaimed authors of the decade, directed by one of the most interesting auteurs in the industry about the process and passion behind making art, is already a recipe for success, and even then my expectations were surpassed, lapped, and completely left in the dust. It takes elements that were great because they took full advantage of the manga format and converted them into stellar sequences of cinema that take advantage of the medium of film, Whether it's bringing short, almost throwaway jokes to life in expansive and hilariously unhinged cuts that I can't even begin to understand how they were able to animate, the warmth and nostalgia of youth and finding someone whom you can truly depend on, or the absolute devastation that I won't go into any more detail about for spoiler reasons. The bond between Fujino and Kyomoto and how it grows and evolves over the course of this film, despite its sub-hour runtime, was superbly charming and filled with the explosive emotions of youths exploring their passions. And the answer to the ultimate question of why do you draw, while never explicitly answered in words, becomes one of the most cathartic and heart-rending scenes from anything I've ever seen, to the point where I'm tearing up just talking about it. And the incredible attention to detail in the character animation and color design is astonishing. If you followed me long enough, you already know I love that pretentious artist stuff. But Look Back is by far the most intimate and emotional version of these themes that I've ever seen. It is an absolute must-see for everyone. And that about covers it. Those are all the anime from last season that I ended up finishing. Of course, as I mentioned, I didn't just happen to pick all of these shows at the start. It took a lot of wading through mid and trash to find the stuff worth watching. So if you want to see my unfiltered thoughts on everything from the past season, you can check out the seasonal wrap-up show series over on my side channel, Ember Unplugged. And if you just want to see me yapping or reposting anime fan art, you can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. Special thanks to Rourke Tanjoin, Chris Adili, Ryan Johnson, and all my other patrons for their generous support. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.